That night, she had learned Zubair's intentions, that he was once again seeking her closeness, and after knowing this, she had decided in her heart that today she would remain knowing this secret, which she had been whispering to know for a long time. That night, she lay down in her room at Osir and covered herself with a quilt. She showed that she had a severe headache, due to which she would neither be able to go out nor sit down to eat among everyone. She had comforted Zubair by lovingly telling him that she had taken a bath and would lie down for a while, then he would feel calm, so that he could start his work with peace of mind and no feeling of drowsiness or restlessness would remain in his body. Zubair went out, trusting her words. She knew very well that after dinner, Zubair would go out, which is his custom, and the rest of the family would go to their rooms. She came in and lay down after closing the door tightly. She could feel that her mother-in-law was constantly cooking in the kitchen, which was covered with burnt ash, but she lay down silently. Nothing mattered to her today. She knew the secret anyway, the secret she was eager to know. She saw from the door, they were busy eating. And after dinner, as soon as her mother-in-law and father-in-law went to their rooms, Zubair sat there for a while and then got up, looking around mysteriously at her. Sonia had guessed what the man was planning. And knowing his intention, she quickly turned back and folded the sheets on the bed, covered them with a blanket and came back to the door. For a moment, just for a moment, the thought crossed her mind that she should change her mind, but then the same madness came into her eyes that she would not be able to change her decision today. And thinking this, she opened the door and slowly came out. After coming into the courtyard, her husband Zubair took out his mobile and, putting the mobile to his ear, looked around and started talking to someone mysteriously. He did not understand much of what was being said, but after talking for only 2 minutes, he put the mobile in his pocket and went out with satisfaction. She did not look back to see if anyone was following her or if tonight was the last night of her mysterious activities. Sonia's heart was beating uncontrollably. She was not a free-thinking or independent girl. She was a simple village girl, who was poorly educated, but still confident. She did not know what would happen to her after doing all this. But for now, she wanted to know this secret. That's why, holding her fearful heart, with her faltering steps, she kept following him. The cold had spread all around, and the sensation of cold was tearing her body. She pulled Shamal, who was lying on top of her, further and laid her on top of her and once again extended her steps behind Zubair. She was walking behind him so leisurely at a short distance that Zubair did not even realize that someone was following her. After going a little distance, Zubair stopped, as if he was waiting for someone. And following him, Sonia also stopped by taking the shelter of a tree. No matter how brave she was, the trembling of her hands and the small drops of drink were showing the war of fear going on inside her. Somewhere, the thought was still coming to her heart that she should still go back. That person wants. Whatever he did, what difference did it make? But now that the night had come, it was impossible for him to turn back. Zubair stayed there for a while. When after a while, someone came walking towards him, Sonia narrowed her eyes and tried to see him, and after a while, she recognized him. It was Zubair's friend Furkan, who was coming towards her quickly, secretly holding something in his hand. After a while, they continued to talk to each other in whispers and then moved forward. When Sonia once again held her trembling heart and started following him. Today, this matter would be solved. How long would she tolerate all this? Today, she had to get to the bottom of this matter. Before something worse happened, they were heading towards a more desolate place. When after going a little further, they stopped under a tree and climbed up a small wall and sat down. They were facing the dense forests, and their backs were to the path behind them, due to which Sonia could not see them clearly. For some time she stood there trying to see them, and then slowly walked to one side of the wall and sat down. Now they were visible a little more clearly, but due to the darkness she could neither see their forms properly nor hear what they were saying. It felt as if they were not even talking. After a while, Zubair's voice pierced the darkness and silence and hit her ears. Come. It felt as if he was asking Furkan about something. And Furkan extended the small bundle in his hands towards her. Sonia's heart was beating so fast that it would break her ribs and come out. His hands were constantly shaking, and he was clenching his fists and clenching his mouth tightly. I don't know what that person was going to do. After a while, Zubair started opening the bag, while Furkan was telling him very confidentially. Now they ask why I need deer meat every third day. How long will I be without excuses? While Zubair was silently listening to her, he was opening the bag. Deer meat. Sonia's forehead froze. Why were those people talking about deer meat? She was thinking this right now, when suddenly Zubair reached out and picked something from the bag and put it in his mouth. Furkan, who was sitting nearby, felt a strong chill. Sonia tightly put her hand on her mouth. He was sitting in front of her, chewing and eating that raw meat like an animal. And in the moonlight, his face felt like some terrible animal was scratching and eating it after hunting it. Sonia's condition at that time was like, if you bite it, there is no blood in your body. Her eyes were swollen. She couldn't even believe it. When she looked at the man in surprise as he stood up once more, and then she ran away screaming. She was running blindly at that time, without caring whether someone was calling her or whether someone was following her. She, who had come here by showing bravery some time ago, now felt as if she would fall on the same path and die of fear. All this had not started today. This had started on that night, the night when it had been 2 months since her marriage. She had decided that she would be doing this. By that time, she had been a victim of various whispers, but she had no idea that she would see all this. That day too, it was midnight, and Zubair had not come home yet. She was tired of waiting for him. Sleep was weighing heavily on her eyes due to the fatigue of the whole day. Everyone else in the house had already thought. In such a situation, she was just waiting for him by looking at the door. She knew that even if she fell asleep, that person would definitely come and wake her up. So, it was better for her to stay awake and wait for him than to disturb her sleep. Zubair did not get angry with her, but it was still the early days of their marriage, and she did not want to be the victim of his unreasonable anger. In the evening, when he came home, Sonia was cooking in the kitchen. He sat outside with his mother, when his mother, looking at him with learned eyes, said, Zubair, today it has been 2 months since your marriage and you have not told the good news. You know very well that until today, most of the boys in our family have told the good news only after a few months of marriage. Have you become lazy like Furkan? Zubair cast a bored look at his mother, and then at Sonia, who was baking bread in the kitchen, whom he had married only 2 months ago. Now every other day he would hear that he was late in telling the good news. Sonia also turned and glanced at him. The color of his face had clearly faded. Zubair wanted to tell everyone the truth, but then for some reason he got up quietly and went to his room. After a while, Sonia came to the room to invite him to dinner, while he was lying on the bed staring at the ceiling. Sonia and he had been married by his mother's will, and it was her mother who liked Sonia. He had not seen Sonia even once before the marriage, and even now they rarely met each other. Sonia had been quite hesitant since the day before, and today, 2 months after the marriage, her hesitation was still there. Sonia gently asked him to eat and started to turn back, when he went forward and grabbed her arm. After eating, he had to return to the room quickly. "Don't let it happen that you get busy with work and I fall asleep." Sonia knew the hidden emphasis after that very well. So she silently nodded her head yes and went out. A storm of thoughts had arisen in her mind. Tonight, everything that she had endured every night was going to happen again. It was not possible for someone to get tired of the relationship between husband and wife just 2 months after marriage. But she was a girl who was starting to get tired now. She could not bear Zubair's intensity in any way, even at times she would faint. And Zubair would scratch her like a beast, as if he had truly become a beast. Even while eating, she kept thinking about the same thing. After finishing the meal, she got up and went to make tea for everyone. It was customary in this house that everyone drank tea together before going to bed. And that night too, she clearly noticed the thing that she had been noticing for the past month. At first, she had taken it as a matter of course, but now she would have paid full attention to it. As soon as Zubair had eaten, he got up after eating and left the house without any tea. She tried to find out about Zubair from her mother-in-law a couple of times in conversation, but she remained silent, ignoring his words. And anyway, how could she know where her son had gone? Zubair had not told anyone while going out, he just got up quietly and went out. She had not waited for him. She knew that now he would come back at the time when everyone would have thought. Even then, everyone had thought. She had also noticed one thing in this house, that on the day he would sneak out of the house in the evening, everyone else would go to bed early. She didn't know what deal these people had reached, but now Sonia was annoyed by all this. She didn't know why she felt as if there was something going on that only she knew about. She was just thinking about those hands when the door of the room opened and Zubair entered. Sonia's kept looking at Pierre. Her red face was not hidden from her eyes. As soon as he entered, he smiled at her and quickly went to the washroom. This was his habit. Either he would return, he would go straight to the washroom and come out after taking a bath. She had tried to ask him many times why he came after taking a bath, but he would silence her by giving her some harsh answer. After coming out of the bath, Zubair walked towards Sonia sitting on the bed. Sonia stared at him in surprise for a while, and then turned her attention completely to Zubair. She was starting to like Zubair. His closeness comforted her, but still, there was a certain confusion in her mind. Zubair, while touching her gently, suddenly pounced on her in a terrifying way, and his touch was so intense that she froze. It happened every time. Whenever he went close to her to be close to her, after a while he would start scratching her like an animal, and she would writhe in pain. She could not help but scream and gather the whole world, but then she would fall silent, wondering what people would think of her. She would stay in a strange and terrifying atmosphere all night long, and then by morning the person would be fine again. She did not know what horrors befell him at night that made him worse than animals. It had begun from the very first night, the night she had decorated his room for him with beautiful dreams and aspirations. Sonia had seen him for the first time at the time of marriage, and she found him to be a pleasant person in terms of appearance and appearance. But she was still afraid of not knowing what kind of temperament he possessed. That natural fear, which every girl feels when going to an unknown place, was also very much true for her. There were only her mother-in-law and father-in-law at home. The head was a little weak, but the mother-in-law was a housewife with good work. A younger brother-in-law, who often stayed out of the house due to his wanderings. Sonia was her father's darling, the elder sister of two brothers. On the first night, when Zubair came to her, he talked to her for some time. She liked his style and tone quite well, and after talking to him she felt quite relaxed. A short while later he went out asking her to change, and after about an hour he returned. She was quite surprised that he had gone to no one. And when he returned after an hour, his mood had changed a bit. Sensing which, Sonia was quite surprised, but she remained silent, thinking that maybe his mood had changed due to staying up late and being tired. But he had become completely fine with her by morning. Talking to her, a cheerful person, with whom she did not even feel that he had recently gotten married, and that she did not know Zubair, continued like this for the next 2 or 3 nights. Thinking it was her own fault, she would dismiss the fact that he might have gone out for a walk before going to bed at night. But it was strange that when he decided to go out, he would come to her for her closeness on his return. She went to live with her mother for a few days, and she completely forgot about it. Although she was happy with Zubair, his changing mood still made her hesitant. She would avoid talking to him unless he was in a good mood. Another concern at home was the behavior of her mother-in-law, who would sometimes be perfectly fine and normal with her, and sometimes become so strict that she was surprised. Ever since she got married, she had made up her mind that this was her family now and this was everything to her. She never misbehaved with Zubair's mother and father, but still, for some reason, sometimes what happened to this mother and son would make them behave strangely. Sometimes when she woke up at tahajjud time, she felt as if her mother-in-law was already awake in the house. One day, she plucked up courage and went outside to see if her mother-in-law woke up so early. But when she went out, she saw smoke filling the kitchen. She quickly moved towards the kitchen out of fear that something might be burning or something had caught fire. But as soon as she entered the kitchen, she was surprised to see that her mother-in-law was holding something in her hand with her back towards the door, from which the boiling smoke had engulfed the entire kitchen. She involuntarily took 2 steps back in fear. Her heart was beating so strangely that she could not understand what her mother-in-law was planning to do at this moment. She also spoke to her husband Zubair in a hurry, but he became very angry after hearing her and said, "Mind your own business. You have no need to interfere in my mother's affairs." Hearing this, she became a little embarrassed and fell silent. After that, whenever she saw any unusual movement in the house, she would remain silent only because of the fear of those people. But this matter was about her husband Zubair, whom she could never forget. Gradually, she stopped considering this habit of Zubair as her own. She had now come to know very well that all this was not her imagination, but a reality that was enough to blow her mind. Whenever Zubair returned late at night, he would gently entice her to be close to him. And when she was completely helpless, he would attack her like a wild beast and unleash all his fury on her. She did not remember the slightest emotion. But it did not matter, she could bear all this hardship. But there were 2 things that constantly worried her. One was Zubair's going out of the house on certain nights and then returning late at night. And the second thing was that sometimes upon his return, there were red spots on Zubair's clothes, which frightened her to the core. It was Zubair's habit that as soon as he returned, he would first take a bath, change his clothes, and then come close to her. Only twice after marriage had it happened that they accidentally came close to each other, and at that time Zubair did not get a chance to go out. During this time, She had clearly seen the difference that Zubair had not become as crazy and wild as before that night. But for some reason, Zubair kept walking around anxiously throughout the day, as if he was troubled or worried about something. How many times would he talk to his mother about secrets, and Sonia would look at them both in surprise. Whenever she went into the room and asked Zubair about it, he would either remain silent or would reassure her by telling her some random story. During all these incidents, his head would always remain silent. Anyway, he had no special status in his own house. His wife ruled the roost, and he was just a man in the house. Sometimes Sonia wanted to mention this to her head. But then she would be afraid that if his head told his mother-in-law, it would become even more difficult for her to live in the house. And that night too, she mustered up so much courage and did everything she could not even imagine. She was a naturally shy girl, and it was probably the first time in her life that she had gone so far alone at night. Just to find out who was hiding behind Zubair's secret of going out during certain days. If Zubair had felt even a little bit angry that day, it might have been his last day in that house. Because Zubair was convinced to tell his mother everything, and it was not at all the case that Sonia would do anything against Zubair's or his mother's wishes. Zubair was very worried that his life would be green as soon as possible and some good news would spread in their yard. Sometimes, while mentioning this, he would even tell Sonia that if we got married, many problems in my life would be eradicated from the root. And she would have come to me after hearing this. She knew very well from their conversations that Zubair and his mother only meant a son, and that they wanted a son from Sonia first in any case. She often wondered what would happen to her if she didn't have a son. But right now, she was worried about getting pregnant as soon as possible, and convincing her family that she could become a mother and that she had no shortcomings. Because just 2 months after the wedding, her mother-in-law had a ghost that she was late in telling the good news. This thing has taken on a traditional form and is shaking the foundations of our homes. Within a month or two of the wedding, the family members are anxious to know when the daughter-in-law will tell the good news, and her name should be high in the family, saying, "So-and-so's daughter-in-law told the good news as soon as she arrived." We have included in our foundations the fact that traditionally we want our daughter-in-law to announce the good news as soon as she comes to our house, within a month or two of the wedding. And if she does not announce the good news, we liken this to our daughter-in-law's laziness. However, we do not think that all this is in the hands of Allah, and He is capable of doing everything. If He wants, it is just a game of a bridge, and if He does not want, He can spend His entire life on the cross of waiting. The first few months of marriage should be dedicated to the husband and wife getting to know each other, so that they know each other well. And only after that, they should sincerely hope that Allah will bless them with a blessing like children to bring more joy to their lives, whether it is a daughter or son. But how could Sonia explain this to them, when along with other people, Zubair also had the same demand? That night, when Zubair came home at Asr, he saw Zubair and his mother talking to each other about secrets and needs. When a crack of doubt spread in his heart, surely today there was something or the other that she was whispering to Zubair about her, and after that, Zubair going inside and lying down was also a matter of worry and concern, because he never takes it after coming home. And then tell her to get ready that night and then go out. That night she had firmly decided that she would find out the secret, how much of her mother-in-law's hand was behind this secret. Finally, that day her courage succeeded and she found out the identity of this person. She was so scared that she almost died of fear. Zubair had also seen her running back. For some time, he kept watching her in a state of uncertainty, and then, Dropping everything, he got up and started running after her, but she was running so fast that she disappeared from his sight in an instant. She was frightened and opened the door of the house with a loud voice and came in and went straight to her room and closed the door tightly. That scene was coming before her eyes again and was making her extremely anxious. She sat down with her back against the door. Eating raw meat in the moonlight, and as horrible as it seemed at that moment, Sonia had no idea that this was the person she had been living with for so many months. The more wild and carnivorous he seemed to her at that moment, the more she was surprised by the brutality that he was showering on her. What was all this? She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her heart was pounding and she was trembling with fear. She didn't know what they would do to her now. When the door opened again after a while and of course, Beer had come in, she started him off again in a loud voice as soon as she came in. Sonia, Sonia, come out. Hearing their voices, her mother-in-law and father-in-law had also come out and her mother-in-law was looking at her son with concern and asking Zubair, "What's the matter? What happened?" While he kept banging on the door without answering her, Sonia kept banging on it. "Come out. I'll tell you the whole truth. I'll tell you the whole truth." But she was so scared that she felt as if she would open the door and go out now, that beast would eat her too. How could such a carnivorous man trust that every second or third day, before coming close to her, he would scratch and eat this raw meat like an animal? Furqan's repeated words were still echoing in her ears, the raw meat of a deer. Of course, Furqan would bring him the raw meat of a deer, which he would eat to quench his thirst and then become a terrified beast and go close to Sonia. But why did that man do this? In her childhood, she had heard many such stories in which a person would get into such a bad habit of eating human flesh that he would kill so many innocent people to get this habit and eat their flesh. Everyone knew that these cannibals he used to seek refuge from her, but when his grandmother told him these stories, it seemed to him as if they were made-up stories and had nothing to do with reality. He had never thought then that all this would happen to him. Zubair was banging on the door so hard that he would break it down in a moment. She got up after a while and forced herself to open the door with trembling hands. When she saw the person entering, she screamed once again. Zir went forward and put his hand on her lips tightly, and the unpleasant smell coming from near Zubair made Sonia's nostrils sting. Perhaps Furqan had also come home after him, so they all quickly entered the same room. When Zubair looked at him and said softly, "Don't shout, I will explain everything to you myself. Look, everything you have seen, I am doing it for you, for our child and for our happiness." Tears started flowing from Sonia's eyes. She barely freed herself and ran to her father-in-law and said, looking at him, she said, "Uncle John eats raw deer meat from the forest. I have seen him with my own eyes. He is not human." But her father-in-law bowed his head silently and she was surprised. That is, everyone present here was aware of this reality, except for her. She was looking at them all with surprised eyes, when Zubair held her and made her sit on the sofa and while sitting in front of her, revealed the secret that made her shudder. "Now I will do something only for you and to strengthen our relationship. Sonia, look, I am a human, not an animal and not a carnivore. I also eat this out of compulsion, and when our first son comes into this world, then I will give up all this." In a sultry tone, Sonia found the person sitting in front of her very pitiful. She was looking at him in surprise. There were still small particles of meat in his mouth and a little blood on the outside of his lips, which made her feel disgusted. Everyone else was also present in the room, and Sonia's mother-in-law was staring at her son with a stern expression, as if she did not want him to reveal this secret to his wife, but he was explaining this to Sonia without caring about anyone. When I was born, I was very cowardly and timid. Our family tradition is that the daughter-in-law is beaten first and the beaten one is considered very brave and strong. But seeing my cowardice, our family used to laugh at me and make fun of me, and most people would even say that it would have been better if you had given birth to a girl, the one you have worked so hard on, Zubair. From the very beginning, my mother took me to Pir Baba and had him blow on my amulet, which would have made Mir and Zile disappear, but I was still not brave. I stayed at home all day like a girl and did not talk to anyone except Furkan. Even if the other boys in the family tried to talk to me, I would run away from them. When you and I got married, Amma was afraid that if her son continued to act like this in front of his daughter-in-law, his pressure on her would be completely non-existent. Pir Sahib had also explained to Amma that if I had been a coward, my son who was a coward might also end up like me. Sonia looked at her mother-in-law in surprise, who was sitting with her head bowed while listening to her son's words. Pir Sahib had told me that whenever I had to go near you, I would have to eat raw deer meat before going near you so that our future son would be brave and I would become powerful and impress you with my power so that you would be in awe of me. But I have never been wrong about you. I only wanted our son to be brave and powerful, and I am doing all this only for that reason. I myself want Allah to give us children as soon as possible, and I can leave all this behind. My mother keeps on admonishing me to chew meat before going to my daughter-in-law's house, lest the closeness of that night should cause pregnancy and our future child should become a coward. But I did not know that you were following me that night. I did not have the courage to go into the forests and find any deer and cut its meat, so I persuaded Furkan to work hard for this task and joined him. He also supports me simply out of his friendship and brings me a little deer meat every night, after which I go near you. For God's sake, do not misunderstand me. He was reciting Surat Ka in front of her in a sultry tone, and she was looking at her husband in surprise, whose mother had involved him in her own self-imposed customs and magic. She looked at her mother-in-law in surprise and said, "Mom, you know that nothing like that happens, right? Then you yourself are forcing Zubair to do all this. And you have even got Uncle John involved with you. You know very well how dirty eating raw meat is, and you advise your son to eat raw meat before going near his wife. How many times have I seen you putting amulets in the corners of the house with the help of some smoke? How long will all this last?" When her mother-in-law looked at her sternly and said, "Girl, you are not aware of the miracles of our Pir Baba. Perhaps we do what our Pir Baba advises us, and if you stop Zubair from coming near you by eating raw deer meat, Zubair will leave you." Sonia was very surprised to hear her words. Those were the people of the era of ignorance who still embraced ignorance. That is why she spoke in a strong tone while looking at her mother-in-law. "I am not at all interested in living with this person. If he does not give up his dirty and filthy habits, then I will not like to live with him either. I will go home as soon as morning comes." But Zubair never wanted to take her away from him. He used to obey his mother like a puppet, but coming here was a matter of his house, so he started pleading with Sonia in front of everyone, "For God's sake, don't leave me. I can't live without you in any way. If you go out and tell me this, I don't know what people will think of me." Sonia had made this clear. "If you don't give up this habit of yours, I won't be able to live with you even for a day. But if you repent of this and make a firm resolve to give up this habit in the future, then maybe I can forgive you and spend the rest of my life with you without ever telling this secret to anyone. But I can't remain silent after seeing you become an animal like this." His friend Furkan had advised him to stop all this before, but his mother always said, "That's why Furkan isn't having children." Today, Furkan had been married for 2 years, but Allah had not blessed him with a child. Furkan used to forbid him every time, saying, "Give up all this for the sake of God. This is only polytheism, nothing else." And now Sonia had also threatened him, saying, if he does not give up all this, Sonia will leave him. His mother started pressuring him continuously. "You must continue your actions and we will never let Sonia leave this house. We can even force her to stay here because she is your wife." But this time, deciding according to his heart and his intellect, he repented of it forever and promised his wife that from today on he would not adopt these filthy customs and traditions and would not even touch raw meat. And Sonia also forgave him, thinking that husband and wife are each other's clothes. Keeping each other's secrets is also part of their rights, and she never wants her to violate her husband's rights in any way or let his honor diminish in any way. Zubair had truly given up this dirty habit of his. Allah blessed him with a daughter after about a year, and now he was happy and content in his home, with the hope that the Lord, who is capable of bestowing mercy, can also bestow that blessing. In life, we have complicated our lives by adopting so many wrong traditions and customs, and we are moving away from trusting in religion and God. Now it is time for us to come out of our customs and live our lives according to Sharia so that our hereafter may also be adorned along with this world.